Hello and welcome back to the Faces of Truth, where we are attempting to help America think for itself again. My name's Alexander McCauley. I'll be your host for the next 15 minutes. Previously, on Faces of Truth, we went through what a virus actually is and how it does operate, and what myths are being spread by Burke and Fauci, the perfect examples of the fact that C's get degrees. This week, we'll address some more myths that are being spread by the opposite side. One is that the virus is being generated by 5G towers. Someone watched too many episodes of Guilty Crown. A virus cannot be transmitted by towers unless it happens to be a computer virus. However, back when the microwave oven was first built, it was built on the electronics behind the cyclotron. I think it was the cyclotron. Might have been some other type of microwave equipment, but I'm just trying to the typical microwave is about 15,000 watts. 1,500 watts. Sorry about that. Okay, 1,500 watts. And as hot as you want your food to get, you'll leave it in that 1,500 watt signal for that amount of time. The signal heats up the water inside the tissues of whatever food you are eating or you are about to eat. This vibrates the food tissues so that they break down. Okay, so now that we've pretty much established that, let's go back into the history of this. World War II, airmen would actually heat up their canned goods in front of the radar. It took about 30 minutes of exposure to the signal. Now, let's fast forward to today. We've used these technologies that originated with radar, radio broadcasting, etc., and we have literally made this massive grid of microwave ovens that broadcast to little handheld devices a signal that transmits data. Now, what happens when something organic gets in the way of this signal? Well, the signal degrades in strength exponentially the further away from the tower you get. But if you're right underneath the tower, and this is why there's hazard agreements between cell companies and the people that service their towers. If you're right up on the equipment, you can get radiation exposure, because radiation is electrical frequency projected at organic tissue. Now, radiation projected at organic tissue, which contains water, heats up the water, which beats up the cell, breaking down the cell and weakening it so that it generates viruses to break down the cell so that it can be replaced. This is one thing Anyway, so if we're killing off our cells en masse, we generate viruses in those cells to break them down so that we can replace them with good cells. So, if you look at it sanely, if you're cooking yourself with any type of radio technology, if you get too close to the antenna, you're definitely going to get cancers, viruses, infections. You're probably not going to assimilate food properly. You will more than likely cook lung cells because radio waves and microwaves cook from the inside out. But you are not going to get viruses specifically generated by the radio signal. This is a myth, and this was a myth that was started with the anime Guilty Crown. But you can definitely cook cells to the point that they're either susceptible to foreign viruses or they start producing their own native viruses. And the thing is, our cell towers are broadcasting at over 1500 watts. So, since we cook food at 1500 with 1500 watts of power over a period of time of exposure, what are we doing to ourselves? Exposing ourselves to over 1500 watts for a longer span of time, almost a continuous span of time. That's the reason we see rise in cancers, viruses, infections, so forth. I don't believe in going backwards as far as technology is concerned. I do believe, however, that if we're going to use it, we need to build it so that it's safe for people. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about vaccines. Back when vaccines were invented by Louis Pasteur, what they were doing was they were weakening bacteria that caused infections, and then introducing them to the system so that the weakened bacteria would trigger an immune response to prevent the person from having to actually go through the infection, the process of infecting, incubating, and healing. We started doing it with viruses, which is the basic process of making a vaccine with virus is you culture the virus in human tissue, usually aborted fetal cells. Then you break down all of this tissue with a detergent. So basically it's dead tissue you introduce into the system. The thing is, doctors couldn't get the immune system to attack this broken down viral tissue. So what did they do? They introduced toxins into the vaccine so that they could force the immune system into attacking this broken down tissue. Why did the immune system not attack the broken down tissue? It's because the process of breaking it down had already happened. There was nothing for the immune system to do. It was garbage. It would be flushed out of the system. That was it. Then they realized that if they introduced toxins into the system with the material, then they could get that immune system reaction they wanted. These are called adjuvants. Mercury, aluminum, etc. The thing is, if you introduce mercury into your system, one, you're going to get a rise in disorders like autism, Asperger's, etc. If you introduce aluminum into the system in any amount, over time you're going to end up with disorders like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and other things. Basically, aluminum breaks down the lipid insulator between the potassium and the sodium ions that line the nerve cells. Thereby, and in doing so, it makes a short to ground inside your nervous system. Now, they say that the aluminum dosage is okay for us, but we find ourselves ever increasingly getting more and more of these vaccines being suggested to us, which break down this lipid insulator between the sodium and potassium electrolytes that line our nerves and our brain. So we also see happening is, because these vaccines are cultured in human tissue, usually aborted fetal cells, we see our bodies ever increasingly fighting our own bodies, because they had to go in and fight this fetal tissue that they considered invasive tissue, or a foreign biological entity. So when we broke away from introducing starved bacteria into the system so that we could get a faster infection, destruction, and rejuvenation period, we started compromising our immune systems with these vaccines. Now, we've got people like Bill Gates coming out with these new vaccines, which are basically retroviruses that are designed to rewrite our genetic code, rewriting the book of life. Imagine you can take a shot and you can basically become an athlete. You can become however. Okay, there are a bunch of advantages to retrovirus vaccines, but there are also some disadvantages. Whoever designed the vaccine, whatever they designed it to do, however they designed it to rewrite your genetic code, that's what you're going to manifest. If they want to make you a dumb worker in a hive that can't think for themselves, that's what you're going to become. they'll have a vaccine to make you do that. If they want an engineer, they'll be able to inject you with that genetic code. So what is a retrovirus? It's a virus. It's that letter in a bottle I was talking about last week, except in this case, it's a DNA sequence instead of an RNA sequence that the developer of the serum wants to replace your existing genetic code with, or splice into your genetic code. In other words, it's a DNA virus that will introduce something foreign into your genetic code. In the case of the COVID-19 virus, they want to fight the virus with this type of vaccine. What the vaccine will do is it will rewrite your immune system coding so that your immune system will be on 24/7 every hour. So basically, your dogs will be hunting 24/7, which will basically break down your immune system, it will put your immune system into overdrive. And when your immune system goes into overdrive, we usually call this leukemia, it starts breaking down local tissue, causing lesions, etc., etc. Now, as you progress with this induced cancer, they will have ways to shut down the immune system developed so that if you don't get boosters, you will eventually be broken down by your own immune system. Basically, it's going to be mandatory, it's going to be detrimental, and it's going to be built so that they can have a captive customer. If you don't do what they tell you to do, you're not going to get the booster shot. And you will die. Thing is, we're in a hostage crisis, not in a health crisis here. When we heard about the Wuhan virus, the first time, what we should have done was we should have started having what is called a COVID-19 party. Get together, shake hands, transmit the virus as much as we possibly could. Instead, we decided to quarantine everybody that's healthy so that they couldn't build an immunity to it. Okay, let's see what shelter in place did to the Aztecs when Cortez came over. Right now, or back then, the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean were sort of like the walls of our houses. Yes, they were getting a lot of sunlight, a lot of nutrients, etc. But they had never had exposure to the bubonic plague. They had never had exposure to smallpox. They had never had exposure to any of the diseases that we had had exposure to in Europe, Asia, and Africa. When Cortez and Pizarro came over to conquer the West, they did it through bacterial agents. The natives didn't exactly want to comply to their tyranny, which was exactly what they wanted to institute. They didn't want to become slaves to their new masters. So, what did Pizarro and Cortez do? A few of their guys had died from bubonic plague and every other nasty thing that plagued the old world. So, they started giving the infected blankets to the natives. The natives started dying out in droves. But the bad thing about this is, when it's a viral infection, the body develops an immunity and it rewrites the virus. So the only thing the virus can do is its job, breaking down dead cells.